Welcome back to the Performance Wellness Dialogue. I'm your host, Derek Anderson with the Elevate Performance Group. Today we have a very special guest. It's Miss Dr. Elena Herrera. She is an esteemed psychologist and works in Silicon Valley within the tech industry doing couples therapy and working with individuals. Elena, nice to have you. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's good to be here. I'm doing well, thanks.
Awesome. So, I kind of wanted to talk about something we have in common, which is the tech industry and how it's kind of male dominated, but male dominated doesn't always mean it's only men. There's still women involved, and they seem to face more challenges trying to progress in their career paths. Have you noticed this in your experience?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's male dominated, but it doesn't mean that women aren't in this profession. And so I see a lot of women who struggle with, not just getting kind of recognized and promoted, but just finding their voice, like, even in a team meeting, for example. So it comes up a lot in the women that I work with who happen to be techies, engineers, things like that.
Have any of them expressed to you like their desire for growth, or not just personal growth, but career growth, and express their frustrations with trying to excel to that level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a human drive for a lot of us to want to continue to excel. And especially if, you get to a certain point in your life, a certain age, whatever that age is for people. But it's like, I don't want to just be here at this one level. I want to continue to promote. I want to be a manager, director, mentor, whatever. So, I mean, I think it's no different for women in tech. I mean, they want to get recognized. And so I think a promotion not only sort of taps into that human growth desire that we have, but it also gives a sense of validation of I've grown and I've been promoted because somebody saw me as worthy and capable. Because somebody's got to promote us, right? We don't promote ourselves necessarily.
Yeah, this is something I'm very aware of. I'll just share with you and all you listening. So my fiance is in a male-dominated industry. She works with the Steelworkers Union. So there are several female coworkers she has, but all of them have a similar issue where if someone else makes a mistake, they're accused of being at fault for that, and maybe they'll come back later and be like, "Oh, my bad, I actually did it." Like there was a story recently. She does a lot of the accounting and bookkeeping for the union, and people are supposed to bring in their receipts from their business lunches and golf tournaments and whatnot, and if one of the men loses their receipts, they'll blame her for misplacing it because they don't want to get in trouble. But recently, one guy just found it in his car right after and never even apologized, just like, I found it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I understand the pain points and how hard it is to come up. You mentioned like not feeling confident to have a voice in a board meeting or anything like that. What is a key piece of advice you would give a woman looking for her confidence in her voice?
And I think the first thing I would say is, it's not in your head because one of the things that I often see, and this isn't necessarily a rule, it's just something that I've noticed quite a bit, is that if they have an experience of feeling excluded or feeling like, hey, I'm not really recognized or if I'm ignored, they try to talk themselves out of it in a way. Like, oh, maybe it's not really happening. Or if they know it's happening, they can't ignore it. It's maybe I'm just being too sensitive. And so, first, I would say is no, it's not you. You are not being too sensitive. You are not crazy. It's not in your head. You have a right to have your voice be heard. You have a right to be acknowledged. So I think that's the first thing you need to do is just acknowledge that whatever you're experiencing is true. Stop trying to convince yourself. Stop trying to do that because that's just going to make you feel worse, honestly. And I think the second thing I would do is this I think depends on the comfort level of every person because in some situations, it might not be in their best interest to be aggressive and, um, like, listen to me, it's my turn, like that's, well, it's not professional, but, you know, right now, especially with a lot of companies, they're sort of teetering on who do we let go? honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that it necessarily puts you at risk, but again, if there is a woman who's already feeling like they're next on the chopping block, or they're not feeling like they've got the protection or the support from colleagues or from superiors, then I would say, tread lightly, tread lightly. And then taking small steps to try and get, sort of recognized. Is there another opportunity that you can get your voice recognized in a smaller group?
Mm.
Maybe large meetings are not your thing, but is there a way that you can try to get your voice heard in another way? Can you talk to somebody about it? Escalating, might be something that they can do, but again, I don't push for that because that can feel sort of extreme. Um, but I think there's a lot of, I think, power behind just recognizing, you know what, I have a right to have my voice heard. And then once that confidence sort of build, they'll find a way. I firmly believe that we all know, like as humans, we all know how to behave. We all know how to get what we need. But first, we've got to feel confident that that's possible. And so they'll figure it out. They'll figure out what that looks. And if it means leaving a place, then maybe that's the right step too.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you brought up the concepts of talking yourself out of it and acknowledgement. Because to me, that kind of aligns with subconscious thinking. It's kind of learned behaviors, right, of how we speak to ourselves and how powerful language can be. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because the way we see ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves is going to translate to how we sort of operate in the world. If we already have thoughts running in our head, like, you know what, I'm ignored and maybe I should be ignored. Maybe my voice doesn't matter. Maybe I'm not really important. Well, that's going to carry forward. You're not going to have the confidence to say, hey, wait a minute, or let me finish, John. I was talking here for a second. I want to hear what you've got to say, but can I finish right now? Might not let them to do those kind of small gestures of saying, hey, wait a minute, let me advocate for myself. It might make them smaller. So absolutely. Now, I think finding balance is important because I always say we don't want to make ourselves so big either that we don't give space to others, but we don't want to make ourselves so small that we're stepped on, um, or that we ignore ourselves even. But it absolutely depends on what is our own story that we carry around that runs through our head, 24/7.
Yeah, you probably know better than me, but I believe the statistic for how much percentage of our thoughts we're actually aware of, I think it's only about 8%. So 92% of our thinking is just based off a habit and routine. So if you're saying things to yourself like, I can't do this, or I'm scared of this, etc., you might not even really be fully aware that you're speaking to yourself that way. So that's one thing I really try to help with is bringing that awareness and teaching techniques to change that learned behavior. So I'm curious, is this something that you work with your clients on, or do you have any techniques you'd like to share that attribute to
Yeah.
working on that?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you brought up that statistic because I think I had heard that too somewhere, but some like really small thing. Um, But it's absolutely true. Like, so for example, if we're using the hypothetical of a woman who's in a meeting, and I'm sure maybe you're aware of this too, but in the tech industry, it's often common. There's different names for them, but basically, some teams will do it once a week, some will do it every day, where everyone has a turn to talk for a couple minutes to say, what's that project that I'm working on? I forgot what they call them, but let's just, using that hypothetical. And actually, this happened. I had a client who she would frequently like freeze up during these kinds of team meetings. And so I would ask her, like, so walk me through your experience. So, like, describe the boardroom, what's happening. So now, what goes through your head when somebody turns to you? I'm just going to use the name Anna. Anna, you're up. It's your turn. What happens? What runs through your head? She didn't know.
Mm.
And a lot of people were like, I don't really know. I don't know. I'm like, okay. So then a lot of times what I do is, well, you know what? why don't you try paying attention? Maybe that's something you can kind of report on for me next time we meet is when you find yourself in these moments that you freeze, try and see if you can keep track of what's going on in your head, or even just what's going on a daily basis when you're talking to somebody, when you're at your desk. And it's amazing that when you give somebody a task, like pay attention to your thinking, they come back. And I don't know how many times I've heard this, Derek, where they say, my gosh, I had no idea. I'm like really mean to myself. I'm like, yeah, you are. So um, that can be one of the most helpful things for people is just paying attention. For some people, that's enough.
Yeah,
It's enough for them to say, oh gosh, maybe I don't really need to say that to myself. Of course, you can take it a step further, but we've got to first get some data. Like, what are you saying to yourself in these moments, especially the really tough moments where you struggle? And most of the time, people just have no idea, like really have to fish. And so, um, yeah, I think that's the first step to kind of help them out.
it is pretty amazing how you just say like the awareness to be aware, have the awareness to be aware, and
Yeah.
that's all it takes, and then you're blown away. Do you ever provide any journal prompts or anything like that to kind of help people be even more aware or like hyper aware or maybe something else that's in their specific learning style?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned learning style because some people like journaling and some people just think it's stupid. And so I don't recommend anything that they're not going to do. And so that's one of the things that I kind of assess for is like, well, what is helpful for you? And be honest with me. Are you gonna, like I said, when I work with college students, I'm like, are you gonna take this worksheet and have it crumble and like just rip in your backpack because you forgot about it? Or are you actually gonna do, if not, okay, then we're putting it on your phone. So, when it comes to helping people learn different ways of talking to themselves, um, one of the ways that can be helpful is, and I find that women are really good at doing this, is, you know, oh my gosh, like, what would you say to your best friend here? If she was sitting right here next to you on this couch that I've got right behind me, she was sitting right next to you, and she was saying to herself, I'm so stupid. I'm the worst engineer. There's nothing that I can do right. What would you say to her? And they kind of get stunned because they know where I'm going with this. And so sometimes we just take time like saying, yeah, if it were your friend, you would be horrified. And so I'll even do like if they're visual, say, can you picture her right now? Can you picture her? Like, would she look sad? What would she look? I'm like, yeah, because it is devastating. You don't want your friend to feel like that, do you? And like, no, of course not. So why is it okay for you to do that? Like, I feel horrible that you have to go through that. Can we begin to see yourself as somebody who might be deserving of some compassion too? Now, not everybody can get there. Sometimes it takes work just to kind of build with somebody's, I think, view of themselves as worthy. And so, but if somebody is, a little bit easier to kind of tackle in, and a lot of times that depends on like upbringing and trauma and things like that, then we can go far with just having that little bit of exposure of just consider what you might tell a friend and just sit with that. Can you take a breath? Can you imagine, saying that to yourself right now? What is that like for you? Um, and so that can be helpful. Again, it doesn't always work for some people. They might need multiple rounds of just sort of building up that self-compassion. But again, it is that awareness, though, that they have it now next time to say, would I be saying this to my friend?
For sure. Yeah, I like how you put that. Um, so with awareness, it obviously runs pretty deep. So, part of your work, do you help them uncover where those subconscious beliefs kind of stem from? I'm wondering if it's from a little bit of stigma amongst the male workforce, like them kind of thinking that women are less capable than them, or if that's something that they might portray maybe subconsciously. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that it can come from that. I mean, everybody's got their personal experiences growing up as children, and who knows what kind of messages they got from parents that stuck with them, some of them harmful, some of them, positive. But there's a lot to be said for environmental factors. So, I worked with college students in the College of Engineering at two different universities. And so, for some of these women who were going into engineering, they were already in a field, even in the classroom, as being outnumbered by men. So it started even there. And so if you've got women who from the classroom, from the time they're studying this, and then go all the way into their career where they're shunned, where they are kind of slighted. I mean, this happened to me all the time. I would hear stories of some of these young women in college saying, I'm one of only two women in the classroom. And, of course, they have labs and stuff, and they have group projects. And this one story, the student said, I was the one who knew the answer. And so everyone was stumped in this lab project or thing that they were working on. And she kept saying, this, no, you guys, it's this, and this. And they kept ignoring her, ignoring her. They kept round and round and round. Finally, they got the answer, and it was the one she had right from the start.
Mm.
And they just wouldn't listen to her. And even like kind of like what you were describing with your fiance, with that guy who couldn't find his receipt and then never apologized. Same thing happened to her. They
Mm-hmm.
realized that she had the answer all along, and they didn't say like, "Oh, we're sorry." They just kind of continued on. And some people might say, "Well, that's stupid, just let it go." No, again, this comes to like, don't brush it off. Don't ignore it. Don't tell yourself it's no big deal. Sometimes we have to be, tough with ourselves and say, yeah, let's move on. But that hurts and that sticks with us. So you can imagine multiple, multiple, multiple moments like that happen. If somebody's 20 years old and then they're 40, it's a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a really common occurrence, and over time, it's really hard to not internalize it, and that's when we a lot of self work has to be done, which might not have been necessary before, and it's rough that you get to that point where you have to work past that. So, if you're working with someone who's internalizing these issues, having the right answer but not being taken seriously, what
Mhm.
kind of tasks or objectives or ways would you present to them to help them move through that, to reach their next level of personal growth?
Yeah, it's not an easy path for them because they might be working in a setting that is not going to change. So sometimes it's just about presenting options. What makes the most sense? What do you see for yourself? Do you want to continue? What are small ways that you can um, sort of make the environment better for you? Sometimes there's very little that can be done about that. So a lot of the work that I do is just internal. So is helping them at least kind of shake off and get less attached to those negative views of themselves. Um, so that at the very least, I don't want to minimize it though, that sounds like I'm minimizing, so that they can sort of develop this view of themselves that says, I'm competent, I'm strong, I know what I'm doing. And that right there, like I said earlier, is going to help them just show up differently. And it's not saying that people are necessarily going to respond differently. They could, hopefully they will, but they have a better sense of themselves. And that can take a lot of time because, again, if you've got a lot of negative experiences, if you've got childhood issues, that belief of themselves that they might have internalized can be almost like something that has just now like implanted.
Mm-hmm.
So it can take some time. So a lot of patience and compassion. I often say, like, you're trying on a new pair of clothes here. It's going to feel funny a little bit if you, especially if you're giving yourself a new makeover. So it's okay if you start telling yourself, I'm competent, maybe? Question mark versus I'm competent. It's okay if it doesn't quite fit for you. Let's just sort of honor where you are and don't try to convince yourself that either, because that's going to get you stuck and frustrated with yourself. But just say, hey, there's a reason why this kind of new view of myself might even be hard, even if it's the view I want to have of myself.
I love that you brought up how much time it takes because I'm sure you've ran into this occurrence where you might be working with someone new, and if it's not as immediate or as quick as they like, they get scared or get discouraged and then they stop working with you. I have a
Mhm.
similar experience in the fitness industry, but for me, as someone who's been to therapy most of my life, I can totally relate to how hard it is. And but as we know, nothing worth having is easy.
Mhm.
So, what are some things that you do to express that to someone and get them to continue their self growth with you?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you know, a lot of the clients that I work with, especially in the like tech and engineering fields, have not been in therapy. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just anecdotal, but I've worked with a ton of clients so far, and I'm their first experience
Wow.
Wow.
with therapy. So they don't really know what to expect. And so I often kind of tell them from the very beginning, like you might get frustrated, you might, grow impatient, and that's okay. I'm here alongside with you. One thing that I didn't get in grad school was a magic wand.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I wish that I had that. I wish I had that for them myself. And so I think that if I develop a strong enough relationship with them, they can usually go for the ride, you know. But I have to tell them up front, like, yes, I can help you, but remember, this has been years, because most of my people have kind of dealt with struggles for years. This has been years that it's been this way. So as much as you would love to have a, quick fix or something fast, like, and I want that for you too, because who doesn't want to feel better? It might be a little bit slower. So I don't argue with them. In fact, I sort of honor that they want things to be quick. And so I say, of course you want to feel better. Who doesn't? Like, of course you're tired of feeling this way. You want to wake up tomorrow and see yourself differently. You want to wake up tomorrow and have a better outlook. Absolutely. I totally get that. You've been going through a really hard time. Um, and change can be a little bit slower. How does that sound for you? And most of the time, people are okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and there is a common, feature of therapy. And I don't know if you've seen this before, but when you've been feeling bad for a long time and you finally go to therapy, some people find themselves feeling better just after one session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, ah, finally, okay, you're going somewhere. And that matters. That matters.
That first step to the initial consultation or meeting can be the hardest step to take, you know? So
Yeah.
that's a big step. You should reward yourself and be proud of yourself for doing that, especially if you booked it on your own. Like I was lucky to have parents that kind of forced me to go, even though I needed it, right? And I get the vibe from you that working with you is great because I can hear the compassion in your voice. I can hear you genuinely care about everyone you work with progressing. But therapy can be really intimidating. Like I can honestly recall times in my life where I was scared and would even lie to them to the questions they were asking for fear of judgment, even though it's their job. So, congrats on everyone you help. I'm sure it's going great.
Oh,
Um,
thank you. Appreciate that.
Let me ask you: is there anything you would like to touch on?
No, I think we covered a topic that's, near and dear to my heart. I mean, I never had the sort of intellect in math or science to go into the techie industry and science, but I love working with people who did do that. And and I am a woman and I've certainly struggled with some environments. So it's yeah, I'm glad we talked about this. It was good.
Cal State Northridge alum, baby. It's great to have
Go Matadors.
you. Dr. Herrera, please tell the listeners where they can reach out to you and find you.
Yes, I am proud of my website that's about 2 months old now. So it's called elenaheals.com. So it's Elen as in Nancy A, Heals, Heals.com.
Thank you for that. I will, all the listeners, I will put that in the description, and when I edit the video, I will also put the link below. Well,
Thanks.
Sorry,
No.
Dr. Herrera, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you, and anytime you want to meet up and discuss other things for mental health or awareness or whatever the topic might be, I'm passionate about it as well. So anytime, hopefully we can do this again someday.
I'm going to hold you to that. Absolutely. Thanks, Derek. This was cool. Thank you.
Take care, and thank you to everybody listening.